The evacuation sirens had been silent for 3 days when they found Marcus hiding in the ruins of New Geneva's primary school. The 12-year-old boy clutched a battered textbook about ancient earth dragons, his only companion in the devastation that stretched beyond the horizon. The Drakmori Confederation had swept through human space like a cosmic wildfire, their massive star dragons reducing entire colonies to glowing slag with breath that burned hotter than solar cores. Captain Vextar of the Drakmori 4th Fleet discovered the child while conducting final sweeps of the dead world. The alien commander stood nearly 3 meters tall, his scaled hide shifting between deep purples and electric blues as emotions played across his reptilian features. Behind him floated his personal star dragon, Piraxis, a creature of living starlight and cosmic fire that could crack planets with its roar. A human whelpling still breathes on this corpse world, Vextar reported to his superiors through neural link. The response came swiftly and without mercy. Execute the survivor. Leave no trace of their species. But something stopped the Drakmori captain as he watched the small human reading calmly among the rubble. The boy looked up with eyes that held no fear, only a strange curiosity that reminded Vextar of something he had lost long ago. In those green human eyes he saw not the weakness his people despised, but something far more dangerous. Potential. Marcus closed his book and stood, dusting ash from his torn clothes. "Are you going to kill me like you killed everyone else?" he asked in perfect Drakmori, the guttural language flowing from his lips with impossible fluency. The child had been listening to their communications, learning their speech patterns with a speed that defied explanation. Vextar's inner eyelids fluttered, a sign of deep surprise among his kind. No human had ever mastered their ancient tongue. The language contained frequencies and harmonic overtones that human vocal cords should not have been able to produce. Yet this child spoke as if born to it. "How do you know our words, human spawn?" Vextar demanded, his voice carrying the authority of one who had commanded fleets across a dozen star systems. Marcus tilted his head, considering the question with the gravity of someone far older than his years. "The same way I know that your star dragon is sick. Piraxis has a stellar cancer eating at her core. She's been hiding the pain because she doesn't want you to think her weak." The captain's scaled fist clenched around his plasma rifle. Impossible. Piraxis had undergone medical scanning just days ago. The ship's finest dragon healers had declared her in perfect health. Yet as Vextar reached out with his mind to touch his bonded companion, he felt what the human child described, a cold darkness spreading through Piraxis's stellar heart. "You lie, soft flesh. My dragon would tell me of any ailment." Marcus shook his head sadly. "She loves you too much to burden you with her suffering. That's what makes her magnificent. But it will also kill her within 6 lunar cycles if untreated." Piraxis descended from her hovering position, her massive form, larger than the ruined school building, settling nearby with impossible grace. Her scales rippled with patterns of light that matched distant nebulae, and her eyes burned with the intensity of binary stars. She extended her great head toward the small human, sniffing delicately. Through their bond, Vextar felt his dragon's shock and recognition. The child spoke truth. More than that, Piraxis sensed something in the human that set her ancient instincts ablaze. Not prey, not enemy, but something their kind had legends about. A potential dragon lord, one who could command the stellar serpents through will alone rather than technology. "Kill him," came the order again through Vextar's neural implant. "Command Protocol 77 Alpha. Execute immediately." The captain raised his weapon, finger hovering over the trigger. One squeeze would end the last human life in this sector of space. His orders were absolute, his duty clear, but as he looked into those strange green eyes, Vextar made a decision that would reshape the galaxy. "There has been a change in operational parameters," he reported back to command. "The human child possesses valuable intelligence about our fleet movements. I am taking him for interrogation aboard my flagship." The lie came easily, but the consequences would ripple across star systems. By defying direct orders to save one small human, Captain Vextar had just begun a chain of events that would challenge everything the Drakmori Confederation believed about strength, honor, and the nature of power itself. Marcus picked up his dragon book and walked calmly toward the boarding ramp of Vextar's ship. As he passed Piraxis, he paused and placed one small hand against her massive scaled flank. The star dragon's eyes widened as warmth flowed through her, and for the first time in months the pain in her core eased. "Don't worry, beautiful one," the child whispered in perfect Drakmori. "I know how to help you heal. But first we need to convince your stubborn captain that humans are worth more than he's been told." Paraxis rumbled deep in her throat, not a threat, but something closer to a purr. She had found something she hadn't even known she was searching for, and in that moment, the last human child took his first step toward a destiny that would either save two species or destroy them both. The Drakmori flagship Stellar Fury stretched across space like a metallic mountain, its hull adorned with landing bays designed specifically for star dragons. Marcus walked through corridors that hummed with alien energy, his small form dwarfed by the massive architecture built for beings twice human size. Captain Vexistar had assigned him quarters in the detention section, but the boy showed no signs of fear or homesickness. Instead, Marcus spent his first week aboard cataloging everything he observed. The crew's behavioral patterns, their technology, the way star dragons bonded with their riders. He absorbed it all with the intensity of someone studying for the most important test of his life. Because in many ways, that's exactly what this was. Word of the human prisoners spread quickly through the ship. Crew members found excuses to walk past the detention level, curious to glimpse the last member of a species they had been taught to see as inferior vermin. What they found unsettled them. The child didn't cower or weep. He didn't beg for mercy or rage against his captivity. Instead, he sat calmly reading data tablets that Vextar had provided, teaching himself advanced Drakmori history and military tactics. "The human studies our greatest victories," reported Lieutenant Zarthul during the weekly briefing. He reads about the Battle of Crimson Nebula, the siege of the Crystal Worlds, our expansion through the Outer Rim. But he asks strange questions. Vextar's scaled brow ridge lifted. What manner of questions? He wanted to know why we never learned from the Stellar Wraith's defensive strategies, why we abandoned the mining rights to the Aurelian system after we conquered it. He asked if we had ever considered that some of our enemies might have surrendered, not from fear, but because they realized resistance was economically inefficient. The captain's claws drummed against his command throne. In 2 decades of military service, he had never heard anyone analyze Drakmori conquests from such angles. Their way was simple: find strength, crush weakness, claim victory. The human child seemed to see patterns they had never considered. That evening, Vextar visited Marcus in his cell. The boy looked up from a holographic display showing star dragon anatomy, his green eyes bright with fascination. "Your dragon feels better," Marcus observed without preamble. "The treatment is working, but she's still hiding something from you." It was true. Paraxis had shown marked improvement since the child's strange healing touch. But Vextar sensed his bonded companion holding back some crucial information. "Speak plainly, human. What does Pyraxis conceal?" Marcus closed the hologram and faced the towering alien captain. "She's not just sick. She's pregnant. The stellar cancer was actually her body's confused response to carrying eggs that don't match normal dragon physiology. Her offspring will be different, more powerful but also more dangerous to birth." Vextar's breath caught. Dragon pregnancies were incredibly rare, often occurring only once every few centuries. If Paraxis truly carried young, it would be an event of massive cultural significance. But pregnant dragons traditionally retreated to sacred nesting worlds, not served aboard warships in active combat zones. "How do you claim to know this?" Vextar demanded. The boy's expression grew distant. "On Earth, we had legends about dragon bonds, too. Most humans thought they were just stories, but my grandmother taught me differently. She said humans and dragons were meant to be partners, not enemies. When I touch Paraxis, I can feel what she feels. And she's terrified of telling you about the eggs because she thinks you'll send her away." That night, Vextar bonded deeper with Pyraxis than ever before, pushing past her mental barriers with gentle persistence. What he found there shook him to his core. 3 eggs, each containing a hatchling whose stellar signature burned brighter than any dragon in recorded history. His companion had been protecting not just herself, but the next generation of star dragons. The revelation changed everything. Pregnant dragons were sacred among the Drakmori, protected by laws older than their spacefaring civilization. But more than that, the human child had demonstrated an ability to sense things about star dragons that their own advanced medical technology had missed. Word of the discovery reached the ship's Dragon Council, the elite riders who served as Vextar's senior officers. Within hours, Marcus found himself standing before a gathering of the most powerful warriors in the fleet, their bonded dragons arranged in a semicircle that filled the flagship's main hangar bay. Council leader Mordak, a scarred veteran whose dragon Voidrender had participated in 100 battles, studied the human child with eyes like burning coals. This human claims abilities that should be impossible for his species. Perhaps we should test these claims more thoroughly. What followed was unlike anything in Drakmori military history. One by one they brought Marcus before their dragons, challenging him to demonstrate his supposed connection to their kind. The boy approached each massive creature without fear, placing his hands against scales that could deflect plasma cannon fire, and somehow, impossibly, began revealing secrets that the dragons had kept hidden even from their bonded riders. He told Mordak that Voidrender still grieved for a clutch brother lost in their youth, and that this old pain made him reckless in battle. He informed Sub-Commander Yixara that her dragon Starweaver had been having prophetic dreams about a great war coming from beyond the galaxy's edge. Most shocking of all, he revealed that 3 of the Yao Council's dragons had been secretly planning to attempt the ancient ritual of scale bonding, a forbidden practice that could merge rider and dragon into a single being. By the end of the session, the hangar bay fell silent. These were truths that the dragons had shared with no one, intimate details that even their closest human companions had never suspected. Yet a 12-year-old human boy had uncovered them all with nothing more than touch and instinct. Council leader Mordak approached Marcus slowly, his massive form casting shadows across the deck plating. "Human child, your people are extinct. Your worlds are ash. By all rights, you should be dead alongside them. Yet here you stand, revealing mysteries that we have spent lifetimes failing to understand. Tell me truly, what are you?" Marcus looked up at the towering dragon rider, then at the assembled creatures whose eyes burned with stellar fire. For the first time since his capture, he smiled. "I'm the bridge you've been looking for without knowing it. The connection between human imagination and dragon power. And if you let me live, if you let me learn from you, I'll show you how to become something greater than either of our species could achieve alone." The words hung in the air like a challenge, a promise, and a prophecy all at once. In the distance, Paraxis rumbled approval, her eggs pulsing with warm light deep within her body. The last human child had just proposed an alliance that could reshape the galaxy, if anyone was brave enough to accept it. The decision to train Marcus officially came after 3 months of unofficial observation. High Command on the Drakmori homeworld had finally learned of the human prisoner's existence, and their response was predictable: execute the alien immediately and court-martial Captain Vextar for disobedience. But the testimonies from the Dragon Council carried weight that even the supreme military authority couldn't ignore. When dragons spoke in unified voice about a potential ally, the Drakmori listened. It had been that way for 10,000 years. Marcus's formal education began in the ship's combat training facilities, spaces designed to push Drakmori warriors to their absolute limits. The boy stood in the center of a gravitational field that would crush most humans instantly, yet he moved with fluid grace that impressed even veteran soldiers. His human physiology, it turned out, adapted to extreme conditions in ways that surprised everyone. "Again," commanded Weapons Master Kexthor, watching as Marcus dodged plasma bolts while maintaining perfect balance on a rotating platform. "Your movements lack the raw power of Drakmori technique, but your speed and flexibility compensate. Use those advantages." The training regimen was brutal by human standards, but proved oddly suited to Marcus's natural abilities. While he couldn't match Drakmori's strength, his smaller size allowed for maneuvers that larger warriors found impossible. More importantly, his human creativity led to tactical innovations that caught even experienced instructors off guard. During one memorable session, Marcus faced off against Sub-Commander Yixara in simulated combat. The massive Drakmori warrior expected an easy victory against the human child. But Marcus used the training facility's environmental controls in ways no one had considered. He turned gravity fields into stepping stones, used holographic obstacles as camouflage, and somehow managed to tag his opponent with a training weapon, while suspended upside down from the ceiling. "Impossible," Yixara muttered as the simulation ended. "Those maneuvers violate basic principles of combat physics." Marcus grinned as he dropped to the floor. "Only if you think like a Drakmori. Humans learned to fight dirty because we were always smaller and weaker than our enemies. We had to get creative or die. But the real breakthrough came during dragon bonding training. Traditional Drakmori riders spent years learning to merge their consciousness with their star dragons through technological interfaces and neural implants. The process was dangerous, with a 40% mortality rate among candidates. Marcus approached it entirely differently. He simply sat quietly beside Paraxis and opened his mind. The connection formed instantly, without technology or preparation. One moment Marcus was fully human. The next he existed simultaneously in his small body and within the vast cosmic awareness of a star dragon. Through Paraxis's senses, he could feel the gravitational pull of distant planets, taste the radiation signatures of different stellar types, and perceive the quantum fluctuations that held reality together. This should not be possible, Dragon Master Velteran observed, as monitoring equipment registered the deepest bond connection ever recorded. The neural patterns show complete synchronization without any mechanical assistance. The human's brain is somehow naturally compatible with dragon consciousness. More shocking still, Marcus could maintain partial connections with other dragons simultaneously. While bonded with Paraxis, he found himself able to sense the emotional states and basic thoughts of every star dragon aboard the flagship. The sensation was overwhelming at first, like being connected to a dozen different radio frequencies at once. But he adapted with typical human resilience. Within weeks, Marcus was serving as an informal mediator for dragon rider pairs experiencing bonding difficulties. His ability to perceive both sides of the relationship allowed him to identify problems that had persisted for years. A dragon named Cosmic Fire had been deliberately holding back her full power because she feared her rider couldn't handle the intensity. Another dragon, Nebula Rend, had been trying to communicate tactical suggestions that his rider consistently misinterpreted as emotional outbursts. The healing sessions became legendary throughout the fleet. Marcus would sit between dragon and rider, his hands touching both, and somehow facilitate deeper understanding between partners who had served together for decades. The success rate was unprecedented, but the implications troubled Drakmori leadership. If one human child could demonstrate such natural affinity with their most sacred creatures, what did that say about their species-wide assumption of human inferiority? The question became urgent when Marcus began working with the fleet's problem dragons, star serpents who had been deemed unsuitable for military service due to behavioral issues. The first was Stormbreaker, a massive female who had killed 3 potential riders during bonding attempts. She was scheduled for exile to a distant mining colony, considered too dangerous for active duty. Marcus approached her cage with the same calm confidence he had shown since the day of his capture. Stormbreaker hissed and snapped, her stellar breath hot enough to melt steel plating, but when the boy placed his hand against the barrier between them, something changed. "She's not violent," Marcus reported to the assembled officers. "She's grieving." Stormbreaker had a clutch sister who died in the war against the Crystal Worlds. Every time she tries to bond with a new rider, she remembers her loss and rejects the connection out of loyalty to the dead. The explanation sent shockwaves through the Dragon Corps. Stormbreaker had been written off as psychologically damaged, her behavior attributed to genetic defects or training failures. No one had considered that a dragon might grieve so deeply as to refuse new partnerships. With Marcus serving as intermediary, Stormbreaker was successfully bonded with Lieutenant Vorthak, a young rider who had also lost siblings in the Crystal Wars. Their shared understanding of loss became the foundation for one of the strongest dragon rider partnerships in fleet history. By the 6th month of his captivity, Marcus was no longer really a prisoner. He moved freely throughout the ship, carried unofficial rank equivalent to a senior advisor, and had earned the respect of warriors who had initially seen him as little more than an interesting pet. Captain Vexistar found himself consulting the human boy on tactical decisions, and the Dragon Council had begun including him in their strategic planning sessions. But the most significant change came when Paraxis finally laid her eggs. The event drew dragons from across the fleet, all gathering to witness what their instincts told them was historically important. The 3 hatchlings that emerged were unlike anything in Drakmori records. Their scales shifted through colors that existed only in deep space, and their eyes held intelligence that seemed almost human. As the newborn dragons took their first breaths, they turned immediately toward Marcus. Without hesitation, without fear, they recognized him as something their genetic memories had been waiting for. The last human child had become the first dragon friend in Drakmori history, and across the galaxy, ancient prophecies began to stir, speaking of a time when the bridge between species would herald either the greatest alliance ever forged or the final war that would consume everything in stellar fire. The summons arrived on a priority channel that hadn't been used in over 2 centuries. Every Drakmori ship within 50 light-years received the same message simultaneously. A gathering of the Great Assembly was commanded on the sacred world of Drakthais. Such assemblies occurred only during times of species-defining crisis, when decisions had to be made that would echo through generations. Captain Vextar knew immediately why they were being called. Word of the human boy had spread far beyond his flagship, carried by supply ships and rotating personnel. Stories of Marcus's abilities had grown with each telling, becoming legends that challenged fundamental Drakmori beliefs about their own superiority. They mean to judge him, Vextar told his senior staff as the stellar fury entered hyperspace toward the homeworld. High Command fears what he represents, proof that humans might have been valuable allies rather than enemies to eliminate. The journey to Drakthis took 12 days, during which Marcus continued his unprecedented training with Paraxis's newborn hatchlings. The 3 young dragons, who had instinctively named themselves Stellar Wind, Cosmos Heart, and Starsinger, showed development rates that astounded dragon experts. Within weeks of hatching, they demonstrated abilities that normal dragons didn't achieve until their 2nd century of life. More disturbing to Drakmori observers was the nature of the bond between Marcus and the hatchlings. Traditional dragon rider relationships required technological interfaces and years of careful conditioning. The human boy needed neither. He communicated with the young dragons through what appeared to be pure thought, guiding their early flight attempts and teaching them to focus their stellar breath with precision that amazed veteran trainers. "Watch," Marcus said to Dragon Master Velteran during one training session. He stood in the middle of the practice chamber as the 3 hatchlings circled overhead, their scales rippling with excitement. Without speaking, without gesture, Marcus somehow conveyed complex instructions through their mental link. Stellar Wind breathed a stream of cosmic fire that curved through the air like a living serpent, weaving between practice targets before splitting into 3 distinct flames. Cosmos Heart created gravity wells that danced in perfect synchronization, while Starsinger produced sounds that resonated across multiple dimensions, creating harmonics that made nearby equipment vibrate in rhythm. "Impossible," Velteran whispered. "Those are master-level techniques. Hatchlings should not be capable of such precise control." Marcus looked up at the circling dragons with obvious affection. "They're not just learning techniques. They're learning to think like humans and dragons at the same time. That's what makes them special." The revelation troubled many aboard the flagship. If human-influenced dragons could achieve such rapid advancement, what did that imply about the potential that had been destroyed along with human civilization? How many breakthrough discoveries and innovations had died with the extinct species? These questions became central when the stellar fury reached Drakthis, and Marcus got his first look at the Drakmori homeworld. The planet was a masterpiece of controlled evolution, its continents shaped by 10 millennia of careful cultivation. Massive cities rose like crystalline mountains from the surface, connected by streams of energy that carried both transportation and communication networks. But most impressive were the dragons. Drakthis hosted millions of star serpents, from ancient elders whose scales held the accumulated wisdom of ages, to young adults testing their powers in carefully supervised practice flights. The sight of so many magnificent creatures moving in perfect harmony took Marcus's breath away. "Beautiful," he whispered as their shuttle descended toward the capital city. "It's like watching living constellations dance." His comment reached the wrong ears. Lord Admiral Kexnoth, Supreme Commander of Drakmori military forces, had been monitoring all transmissions related to the human prisoner. The alien boy's obvious appreciation for dragon culture only confirmed the Admiral's worst fears, that emotional attachments might cloud warrior judgment. The Great Assembly convened in the Hall of Stellar Judgment, a massive amphitheater carved from a single crystal mountain. Representatives from every major world in Drakmori space attended, along with hundreds of bonded dragons whose combined presence made the air shimmer with barely contained power. Marcus stood at the center of it all, a small human figure surrounded by beings who had conquered half the galaxy. He showed no fear, only the same calm curiosity that had marked him from the beginning. When asked to speak, his voice carried clearly throughout the crystalline chamber. "Honored lords and ladies of the Drakmori Confederation," he began in flawless formal Drakmori, his pronunciation carrying nuances that impressed even the most critical linguists. "I stand before you not as a survivor begging for mercy, but as living proof that your greatest enemy might have been your greatest potential ally." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. No prisoner had ever addressed the great assembly with such confidence. Marcus continued, gesturing toward the dragons that filled the chamber's upper levels. "Your star dragons are magnificent beyond human imagination, but they are also incomplete. You've spent 10,000 years learning to command them, to bond with them, to fight alongside them, but you've never learned to dream with them." Lord Admiral Kexanath rose from his position of honor. "Human spawn, you speak of concepts beyond your understanding. The bond between Drakmori and Dragon represents the pinnacle of military cooperation. With respect, Lord Admiral, you're wrong." Marcus's reply was gentle but firm. "Military cooperation is just the beginning. What I've learned from Paraxis and her hatchlings is that dragons don't just want partners in war. They want partners in creation. They dream of building things, exploring mysteries, making art that spans solar systems, but they've been limited by riders who only see them as weapons." To demonstrate his point, Marcus called out through his mental link. Moments later, Stellar Wind, Cosmos Heart, and Star Singer entered the chamber through the great skylights above. The hatchlings were still young, barely the size of shuttlecraft, but their presence commanded attention. What happened next had never been seen in Drakmori history. The three young dragons began to sing, not roars or battle cries, but harmonious melodies that resonated through the crystal chamber. As they sang, their stellar breath wove patterns of light in the air, creating three-dimensional artworks that depicted the history of Drakmori expansion across the stars. But these weren't military victories or conquered worlds. Instead, the light paintings showed moments of beauty, nebulae discovered during exploration, new species encountered in distant systems, the wonder of first contact with civilizations that became allies rather than enemies. It was Drakmori history as seen through dragon eyes, filled with curiosity and hope rather than conquest and domination. The chamber fell completely silent as the performance concluded. Many of the assembled Drakmori had tears in their eyes, recognizing aspects of their own history they had forgotten in their focus on military achievement. "This is what humans could have offered you," Marcus said quietly. "Not weakness, not surrender, but a different way of seeing strength. Dragons want to create as much as they want to conquer. They want to explore as much as they want to destroy. But they've been waiting for partners who could understand those dreams." Lord Admiral Kexnoth's expression had shifted from skepticism to something approaching awe. "Human child, if what you demonstrate is true, then we have made an error of cosmic proportions. But errors can sometimes be corrected." The trial that followed lasted 3 days, with Marcus demonstrating abilities that challenged everything the Drakmori thought they knew about dragon bonding. He showed how human creativity could unlock dragon potential, how emotional intelligence could strengthen military partnerships, and how the combination of human adaptability and dragon power could achieve things neither species could accomplish alone. When the final vote was taken, it was unanimous. Marcus would be granted full citizenship in the Drakmori Confederation, with rank equivalent to a Dragon Lord. More importantly, he would be tasked with developing new training methods that could help traditional riders achieve deeper bonds with their dragon partners. But the most significant decision came from the dragons themselves, through their collective voice, a mental network that spanned the entire planet. They declared Marcus to be the first true bond, a bridge between species that their ancestral memories had always predicted would eventually appear. As he left the Hall of Stellar Judgment, Marcus carried with him not just citizenship papers, but the weight of an entire civilization's hope for transformation. The last human child had become something unprecedented, a catalyst for evolution that would reshape two species into something greater than either had been alone. 5 years after the Great Assembly, Marcus had transformed from prisoner to teacher, from curiosity to cornerstone of Drakmori society. The Dragon Academy on Drakthis had been rebuilt around his revolutionary training methods, producing a new generation of riders whose bonds with their dragons defied every previous limitation. The changes were immediately apparent to anyone who visited the academy. Where traditional training had emphasized domination and control, Marcus taught partnership and mutual understanding. Where old methods had focused on military applications alone, his curriculum included art, exploration, scientific research, and what he called creative cooperation. Standing before his latest class of young Drakmori warriors, Marcus looked every inch the part of a dragon lord despite his human heritage. At 17, he had grown tall and lean, his movements carrying the fluid grace that came from years of dragon bonding. His formal robes bore the stellar patterns that marked him as a master trainer, but his eyes still held the same curious intelligence that had first impressed Captain Vextar. "Today we attempt the deep merge," Marcus announced to the assembled students. "This is not about controlling your dragon partner. This is about temporarily becoming one consciousness with two bodies. The danger is real. Some of you may lose yourselves in the process, but the rewards are beyond anything traditional bonding can achieve." Among his students sat beings who would have been considered impossibly young for such advanced training under the old system. Zarnell, barely past his naming ceremony, had already achieved flight harmony with his dragon Void Whisper. Kexmira, traditionally considered too small for dragon service, had bonded with Nebula Song, a star dragon whose delicate control over cosmic forces matched her rider's subtle intelligence. But the most remarkable student was Pyraxis herself. The great dragon had insisted on participating in Marcus's classes, claiming that her bond with Captain Vextar had grown stagnant after decades of purely military focus. Watching a creature older than most civilizations eagerly absorbing new bonding techniques had initially shocked the academy instructors, but Marcus had welcomed her presence without hesitation. "Remember," Marcus continued, "your dragon doesn't want to be controlled any more than you want to be a slave. They want to be understood, challenged, inspired. When you merge consciousness, you're not taking over their mind. You're creating a new mind that belongs to both of you." The first attempts were clumsy, as expected. Zarnell achieved partial merge but lost fine motor control when his consciousness became confused about which body belonged to him. Kexamira successfully shared senses with Nebula Song but became overwhelmed by the dragon's perception of cosmic radiation and had to break the connection. But when Pyraxis and Captain Vextar attempted the technique, something extraordinary happened. Their merge was so complete that observers couldn't tell where dragon thoughts ended and rider thoughts began. For nearly an hour, the ancient dragon and her captain existed as a single entity that combined Drakmori tactical brilliance with dragon cosmic awareness. "Magnificent," Marcus whispered, monitoring their shared neural patterns. "This is what our species could have achieved together from the beginning." The breakthrough attracted attention from across Drakmori space. Military commanders who had initially dismissed Marcus's methods as too exotic suddenly demanded that their riders receive the new training. Scientific expedition leaders wanted to understand how deep-merged pairs could navigate hazardous nebulae with unprecedented precision. Even artistic communities became interested when merged riders began, creating works that combined Drakmori cultural traditions with dragon perceptions of beauty. But the most significant development came when Marcus announced his intention to undergo the Trial of Ascension, the ancient ritual that would formally recognize him as an Emperor-class Dragon Lord, one of only 7 such beings in Drakmori history. "This is madness," Lord Admiral Kexnoth protested during an emergency council session. "The trial has not been attempted in over 3 centuries. The last candidate died when his dragon partner was consumed by stellar fire. We cannot risk losing the human now, not when his teachings are revolutionizing our entire civilization." Marcus stood before the assembled military leadership with quiet determination. "With respect, Lord Admiral, I understand the risks better than anyone, but I also understand the necessity. If I'm to continue advancing dragon bonding techniques, I need to push the boundaries of what's possible. The Trial of Ascension isn't just about personal achievement. It's about proving that human-dragon partnerships can reach the highest levels of Drakmori tradition. The ritual itself would take place in the stellar nexus, a region of space where multiple star systems converged in a gravitational dance that created unique energy phenomena. According to ancient law, an emperor candidate and their dragon partner had to survive in this environment for 7 full cycles. demonstrating mastery over forces that could tear apart unprotected starships. Pyraxis volunteered immediately to serve as Marcus's partner for the trial. Despite Captain Vexistar's obvious reluctance to risk his beloved dragon, the great star serpent had grown even more magnificent over the years, her scales now carrying patterns that seemed to shift through multiple dimensions. Her 3 offspring had reached maturity as well, becoming legends in their own right as they pioneered new applications for human-dragon cooperation. The day of departure drew crowds from across the galaxy. Dragons filled the skies of Drakthis like living auroras, their combined stellar songs creating harmonies that resonated through hyperspace. When Marcus mounted Pyraxis for the journey to the stellar nexus, the cheers from ground and sky alike created a symphony that would be remembered for generations. But the trial itself took place in isolation, witnessed only by automated monitoring systems that could barely function in the chaotic energy environment of the nexus. For 7 days, Marcus and Pyraxis faced gravitational storms that could crush planets, radiation bursts that turned normal matter into exotic particles, and spatial distortions that made navigation impossible for ordinary pilots. Through it all, their bond held and grew stronger. Marcus discovered that his human adaptability allowed him to process the chaos of the Nexus in ways that purely Drakmori minds couldn't achieve. Meanwhile, Pyraxis's dragon instincts helped her partner navigate energy currents that followed patterns older than recorded history. On the 5th day, they encountered something that wasn't supposed to exist. Another consciousness in the void between stars. Vast and alien, and definitely not Drakmori or dragon in origin. The entity that touched their merged minds felt ancient beyond measurement, and its presence carried implications that sent shockwaves through both their psyches. "We are not alone," Marcus whispered through their mental link. "There are others out there watching, waiting, and they know about the bridge between our species." The revelation added urgency to their mission. Whatever these cosmic observers wanted, Marcus sensed that the future of both human and Drakmori civilizations might depend on proving that their partnership could transcend traditional limitations. When they emerged from the stellar nexus after 7 full cycles, both dragon and rider had been transformed by the experience. Marcus carried new knowledge about the universe's hidden layers, while Pyraxis had evolved abilities that defied conventional understanding of dragon physiology. The ceremony that formally recognized Marcus as Dragon Emperor was held in orbit above Drakthis, attended by every major fleet in Drakmori space. As he accepted the stellar crown that marked his new rank, Marcus looked out at the assembled dragons and riders who had become his people. "Today marks not just my ascension," he announced through galactic communication networks, "but the beginning of a new age. We have learned that strength comes not from conquest alone, but from unity. That power grows not through domination, but through cooperation, and that the greatest victories are won not by destroying our enemies, but by transforming them into allies." The words carried farther than intended, reaching distant star systems where other species listened to broadcasts from the Drakmori Confederation. Across the galaxy, civilizations that had cowered before dragon fleets began to wonder if the age of pure military expansion had ended. In hidden observatories and secret councils, alien leaders debated whether this human emperor represented a new threat or a new hope. Some prepared for war, convinced that human creativity combined with dragon power would make the Confederation unstoppable. Others began preparing diplomatic overtures, hoping to learn from the alliance that had transformed 2 species into something unprecedented. But in the dark spaces between galaxies, the ancient watchers continued their vigil, waiting to see if the bridge builder could prepare his people for the challenges that were coming from the deep void. Emperor Marcus stood on the observation deck of his flagship Unity's Dawn, watching as representatives from 47 different species gathered in the neutral space of the Harmony sector. 3 years had passed since his ascension, and the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. The Drakmori Confederation no longer expanded through conquest. Instead, they offered partnership, protection, and the revolutionary dragon bonding techniques that Marcus continued to develop. The sight before him would have been impossible just a decade earlier. Crystalline beings from the prism worlds floated in specialized atmospheric bubbles, their faceted forms refracting starlight into rainbow cascades. The metal-eating Vorthak had arrived in ships grown from living ore, their cybernetic enhancements glinting as they interfaced directly with their vessel's neural networks. Most remarkably, the stellar wraiths, once bitter enemies of the Drakmori, had sent their most honored ambassadors, beings of pure energy who communicated through controlled stellar flares. The universe watches. Young Emperor, observed ancient Mordex, the eldest dragon in Confederation space. Her scales held the accumulated stardust of 1,000 conquered worlds, and her eyes burned with memories stretching back 10 millennia. Never before have so many species gathered in peace. Your influence spreads farther than any military campaign. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility that had grown with each diplomatic success. His ability to form deep bonds wasn't limited to dragons. Somehow his human empathy allowed him to understand the fundamental needs and fears that drove every sapient species he encountered. The Prism being sought beauty and artistic expression above all else. The Vorthak craved efficiency and logical cooperation. The stellar wraiths yearned for recognition of their ancient wisdom. The gathering today will determine whether we're building a true alliance or just a temporary truce, Marcus replied. Some species are here because they fear our combined power. Others came hoping to learn dragon bonding techniques for themselves. A few are genuinely interested in the cooperative model we've developed. The challenge was unprecedented. Never in galactic history had so many diverse civilizations attempted to create a lasting confederation. Previous efforts had failed because they were built on conquest, fear, or simple economic necessity. Marcus proposed something different, an alliance based on mutual enhancement, where each species contributed their unique strengths to benefit the whole. The negotiations began in the Great Assembly Chamber aboard the neutral station, Concordance. Marcus took his place at the center of a circular arrangement that gave no species precedence over others. To his right sat Captain Vextar, now promoted to Fleet Admiral and serving as Marcus's military advisor. To his left floated Paraxis in her specially designed harness, her presence reminding everyone that this alliance was built on interspecies bonds that transcended traditional boundaries. Ambassador Silvar of the Prism World spoke first, her crystalline voice creating harmonics that translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. Dragon Emperor, your reputation for bridge building precedes you, but we must ask, what assurance can you offer that this confederation will not simply become another empire seeking to expand its dominion? Marcus stood, his movement triggering subtle responses from the dragons positioned around the chamber's perimeter. He had learned to use their presence not as intimidation, but as living proof of successful cooperation. Ambassador Silvar, I offer you the same assurance I gave to my own people when I was still their prisoner, he replied. Judge us not by our words but by our actions. In 3 years, the Drakmori Confederation has not conquered a single world. Instead, we have helped 16 species defend themselves against external threats, shared our technology with anyone willing to reciprocate, and opened our academies to students from across the galaxy. The Vorthak representative, a being called Network Node Prime, interfaced directly with the Chamber's data systems to verify Marcus's claims. Confirmation. Territorial expansion of Drakmori Confederation has decreased by 94% since the human ascension. Military expenditures have dropped 67%. Resources previously allocated to conquest are now directed toward research, exploration, and diplomatic outreach. But what of strength? Demanded Warsinger Kethmore of the Stellar Wraiths, her energy form pulsing with controlled aggression. In our experience, cooperation breeds weakness. Species that cannot stand alone inevitably fall to those who can. This was the moment Marcus had been preparing for. He gestured to Paraxis, who rose smoothly from her resting position and extended her consciousness outward. Through their bond, Marcus invited every dragon in the chamber to demonstrate the true nature of cooperative strength. What followed left the assembled ambassadors speechless. Dozens of star dragons began moving in perfect synchronization, their combined efforts creating gravitational effects that would have required massive technological installations. They wove stellar fire into complex patterns that served as both artistic display and tactical demonstration, showing how unified dragon power could reshape battlefield conditions in ways no single creature could achieve. But the most impressive element was subtlety. Rather than raw displays of force, the dragons demonstrated precision, delicate manipulations of energy and matter, that required absolute trust and coordination between partners. They created temporary stable wormholes, manipulated time dilation fields, and even briefly generated pocket dimensions where different physical laws applied. This is what cooperation achieves, Marcus explained as the demonstration concluded. Not the weakness of dependence, but the multiplication of strength. Each dragon in this chamber is formidable alone. Together, bonded with riders who understand their true potential, they become something that transcends individual capability. The negotiations continued for 7 standard days, with each species presenting their concerns, needs, and potential contributions. The crystalline collectives offered computational power that could process data from entire star systems. The Vorthak proposed manufacturing techniques that could transform raw stellar material into any desired configuration. The stellar wraiths revealed ancient knowledge about cosmic phenomena that even dragon instincts hadn't fully cataloged. But the breakthrough came when Marcus proposed a revolutionary concept, shared consciousness on a galactic scale. Using modified dragon bonding techniques, he suggested creating a voluntary network that would allow representatives from each species to experience limited mental connections with their allies. Imagine, he said, his voice carrying across the vast chamber, a diplomat who could truly understand not just the words of their counterpart, but their underlying emotional and cultural context. A scientist who could draw upon the collective knowledge of 47 civilizations simultaneously. A military commander who could coordinate defenses with allies whose thought patterns they genuinely comprehended. The idea was met with skepticism and fear in equal measure. Many species viewed their mental privacy as sacred, unwilling to risk even limited contact with alien consciousness. But Marcus had anticipated this resistance. I propose to demonstrate personally, he announced. Any species willing to attempt the connection can link with me first, using me as a buffer and translator. If the experience proves harmful or invasive, we abandon the concept entirely. What followed was the most ambitious consciousness-sharing experiment in galactic history. One by one, volunteer ambassadors allowed Marcus to create mental bridges between their minds and his own. The results varied dramatically. Some species found the experience overwhelming, while others discovered unexpected affinities with alien ways of thinking. The Prism beings were enchanted by human creativity and emotional range, while Marcus marveled at their ability to perceive beauty in mathematical relationships that spanned multiple dimensions. The Vorthak appreciated human problem-solving flexibility, while Marcus learned to think in terms of optimized systems and resource flows. Most surprisingly, the stellar wraiths found common ground with human intuition, recognizing similar patterns in how both species approached cosmic mysteries. By the end of the week, a preliminary agreement was reached. The Great Alliance would be established on principles of voluntary cooperation, mutual defense, and shared advancement. Each species would retain complete autonomy within their own territories, but would also contribute to collaborative projects that benefited all members. The signing ceremony was held in the presence of every dragon in the sector, their combined presence creating gravitational effects that registered on instruments across multiple star systems. As Marcus affixed his signature to the Alliance Charter, he felt the weight of destiny settling around him. Today we take the first steps towards something that has never existed, he declared to audiences across the galaxy. Not an empire built on conquest, but a confederation built on understanding. Not dominion imposed through force, but partnership chosen through wisdom. The cheers that erupted from the chamber were transmitted across space, reaching worlds where billions of beings watched the proceedings. For many species, this moment marked the end of an age of fear and isolation. For others, it represented the beginning of possibilities they had never dared imagine. The warning came from the edge of reality itself. Ancient monitoring stations positioned at the galaxy's rim detected something that defied every law of physics. A fleet emerging from the void between galaxies, composed of ships that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Void Hunters had finally arrived, bringing with them the ultimate test of everything Marcus had built. Emperor Marcus, now 25 and bearing the accumulated wisdom of a dozen species, stood in the war chamber of the Alliance headquarters as reports flooded in from across known space. The enemy fleet was vast beyond comprehension, each ship larger than Drakmori dreadnoughts and crackling with energies that made stellar cores look like candle flames. "They're not from our reality," reported Chief Navigator Yixara, her enhanced consciousness processing data from 1,000 observation points simultaneously. These beings exist partially in what we call hyperspace, which gives them capabilities we can barely understand. They can phase through conventional matter, manipulate time flows, and their weapons seem to erase targets from existence rather than simply destroying them. Admiral Vextar, his scales now silver with age but his mind still sharp as stellar glass, studied the tactical displays with growing concern. Our combined fleets number in the hundreds of thousands, but conventional warfare appears useless against enemies who can ignore physical reality when convenient. Marcus closed his eyes and reached out through the vast network of consciousness he had spent years building. Across 47 star systems, he touched the minds of alliance leaders, dragon partners, and the billions of beings who had come to trust in his vision of cooperative strength. Through Pyraxis, now ancient even by dragon standards but more powerful than ever before, he sensed the fear rippling through the galaxy. The Prism beings were creating defensive formations based on pure mathematical harmony. The Vorthak were building weapons that consumed entire asteroids for ammunition. The stellar wraiths had begun singing war songs that resonated across the cosmic background radiation itself. But Marcus felt something else through the network: anticipation. These diverse species had spent 5 years learning to work together, to complement each other's strengths and compensate for individual weaknesses. The Void Hunter invasion might be catastrophic, but it would also be the ultimate proof of whether his alliance could survive existential threat. "Send word to all Alliance worlds," Marcus commanded. "Begin implementation of Protocol Unity. Every species, every ship, every dragon, we face this threat as one people." Protocol Unity was the most ambitious military coordination ever attempted. Rather than traditional fleet formations with clear command hierarchies, it created a fluid network where tactical decisions could emerge from any level based on real-time conditions. Dragon-bonded commanders could instantly share perceptions across vast distances. Species with specialized abilities could be deployed exactly where their unique strengths were most needed. The first engagement took place in the Outer Rim, where a Void Hunter vanguard encountered an Alliance patrol fleet. The results were initially devastating. Conventional weapons passed harmlessly through phase-shifted enemy ships, while return fire erased Alliance vessels so completely that not even debris remained. But the Alliance adapted with speed that surprised even Marcus. Stellar Wraith energy beings learned to match the Void Hunter's dimensional phasing, becoming the first Alliance forces capable of engaging the enemy directly. Prism. Being mathematicians calculated probability cascades that could predict where phased ships would rematerialize. Vorthak engineers began modifying weapons to fire through dimensional rifts. Most importantly, the dragon bonds allowed for coordination that the Void Hunters couldn't counter. When enemy ships phased through solid matter to avoid attacks, Alliance forces didn't lose contact. Dragon-linked commanders maintained awareness of enemy positions through dimensional barriers, guiding follow-up strikes with precision that seemed almost supernatural. The real turning point came when Marcus himself entered battle aboard Pyraxis, now supported by her 3 adult offspring and a dozen other dragons whose bonds had evolved beyond traditional limitations. Flying directly into the heart of a Void Hunter assault formation, he discovered something that changed everything. The invaders weren't evil in any way Alliance species understood. They were refugees. Through deep consciousness contact with a captured Void Hunter, Marcus learned the terrible truth. These beings came from a galaxy that had been consumed by something even more dangerous, entities that existed purely as negation, erasing not just matter and energy but the very concepts that allowed reality to function. "They call them the nullifiers," Marcus reported to the Emergency Alliance Council. "Beings that don't just destroy civilizations, they unmake the possibility that those civilizations ever existed. The Void Hunters fled to our reality because their own was being systematically deleted from existence. The revelation transformed everything. The invasion wasn't conquest. It was a desperate attempt to escape annihilation. But the Void Hunters' presence was destabilizing local spacetime, and their dimensional phasing was creating rifts that would eventually allow the nullifiers to follow. Marcus made the decision that would define his legacy as emperor. Instead of continuing the war, he ordered a complete ceasefire and opened diplomatic channels with the Void Hunter leadership. The risk was enormous. If negotiations failed, the alliance would face a resumed invasion while having shown weakness. But Marcus had learned something about building bridges that even he hadn't fully understood until this moment. True alliance required not just cooperation between natural partners, but the courage to extend trust to former enemies. The negotiations took place in a specially constructed dimensional nexus where representatives from alliance species could interact safely with Void Hunter delegates. Marcus discovered that these beings had once built their own galactic confederation, not unlike what he had achieved. They understood cooperation, sacrifice, and the burden of protecting multiple species. "We offer not conquest," the Void Hunter Supreme Commander communicated through crystalline thought forms, "but warning, the nullifiers follow our trail across realities. Your galaxy will face them whether we remain or depart. But together, our technologies and yours might create defenses that neither could achieve alone." What followed was the most complex engineering project in galactic history. Alliance scientists worked with Void Hunter technicians to create dimensional stabilizers that could seal the rifts, allowing nullifier infiltration. Dragonfire was combined with void phase energy to create weapons that could affect beings that existed as pure negation. Prism being mathematics merged with Void Hunter dimensional theory to produce shields that could protect entire star systems. The work took 2 years, during which former enemies became partners in survival. Marcus found himself serving not just as Alliance Emperor, but as mediator between species whose fundamental nature made cooperation almost impossible. The Void Hunters experienced reality differently from any Alliance race, while Alliance species found void phase existence deeply disturbing. But the bonds held, strengthened by shared purpose and mutual necessity. When the first nullifier scouts began probing galactic boundaries, they encountered defenses that spanned multiple dimensions and incorporated the combined knowledge of 63 different species. The final battle was unlike anything in recorded history. Nullifiers that existed as living absents fought against Alliance forces backed by Void Hunter dimensional technology. Dragons breathed stellar fire through reality gaps while void shifted. Hunters struck at enemies that deleted themselves from existence after each attack. Marcus, now bonded not just with Paraxis but with a network of consciousness that spanned the galaxy, became the focal point for coordination between forces that shouldn't have been able to perceive each other. Through him, Alliance commanders could direct Void Hunter units, while Hunter officers gained access to Alliance tactical innovations. The war lasted 7 months and ended not with victory, but with resolution. The remaining nullifiers were contained within dimensional barriers that would hold for centuries, giving the combined Alliance Hunter Confederation time to develop permanent solutions. In the aftermath, as repairs began across devastated star systems, Marcus reflected on what had been achieved. The small human boy who had been found in a ruined school had become the bridge between not just 2 species, but between multiple realities themselves. "Emperor," Admiral Vextar observed during the victory ceremonies, "you have accomplished something that defies every strategic theory ever developed. You turned a 3-way war into a stable alliance between former enemies and refugees from another dimension." Marcus smiled, feeling the warmth of connections that now spanned not just his galaxy, but the void between galaxies where Void Hunter survivors built new homes under Alliance protection. "I learned something from humans and dragons both. The strongest bonds aren't forged in peace. They're discovered in the moment when you choose to trust someone instead of destroying them." As the celebrations continued across 100 worlds, children of dozens of species grew up in schools.